that is such a huge, just complete brain fart, not only in the head coach position, but the entire coaching staff.
Welcome to Swartz Talkin Sports. I'm your host, Les Swartz. Before we start today's show, please hit the subscribe button. We really could look for the help and let us know what you think out there. Hit a comment section. Let us know how the shows are going. We'll go in the direction you want us to go. You can always check us out via Spotify and Google Podcasts. So if you're in the car and you don't have access to any kind of visual, you can check that out. And be sure to follow us at Swartz Talkin Sports on Instagram as well as TikTok. Well, we've got a great guest for you today. We're going to talk a little college football. We'll go in more in depth. Benny the Book, not on this segment right now. We're going to bring in our guest, Todd Treeger from Columbus, Ohio, a big Ohio State Buckeye fan, season ticket holder. We'll talk Big Ten football. We'll talk college football in general. And then in the second segment with Todd, he's also a big hockey guy, plays a little hockey, and we're going to talk a little NHL. So let's bring him on. Here he is, Todd Treeger. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Les, how's it going, buddy?
Good to see you. It is going good. First of all, thanks so much for jumping on the show. I really appreciate it. Lots of things going on. You're a Big Ten guy. Your Buckeyes now are ranked number 3. Michigan's number 2. So first of all, you were at Notre Dame 2 weeks ago. You were in South Bend. Great place to see a football game.
Oh, it was fantastic. The first time, I should say, this was my second time there. The first time, my alma mater, Bowling Green, played them, and they lost 52-0. So that wasn't really the big-time college experience. And so when my friend got tickets for this game, I jumped all over it. And what can you say? I mean, the tradition, all that, the mystique. Got to walk around the campus, got a picture in front of Touchdown Jesus. Saw the dome, saw the grotto, but the experience was fantastic. All the people of South Bend are super nice. There wasn't anything derogatory towards us.
Okay.
And there was plenty of OSU fans, as you can imagine, because they travel well. What was remarkable, one, the lack of open container laws. You could drink wherever you wanted to go. And then much to my demise, they didn't have any. They didn't sell anything in the stadium, so everybody got to watch.
So you can drink walking around the campus, but once you get into the stadium, you can't drink.
There's nothing. Yeah, and then
tailgating,
total tailgating. And then I will say it's a beautiful stadium, very clean. But the lack of troughs in the men's restroom was very frustrating. So I would suggest that they dial up a redraw on that.
But you know what? It made it all worthwhile, Todd. Ohio State came back, drove down the last play of the game, and beat Notre Dame.
Fantastic. With 4 minutes left in the game, and they got stuffed on that fourth down conversion. There were actually Ohio State fans leaving our section. I think They didn't have a place to stay, and they were on there going to take an early drive back to Columbus, beat the traffic. But once they had that ill-advised screen pass that almost got picked off, you kind of started thinking, clock stops, they got a chance. And then, of course, you get the ball back, and, just the rest is history. What a great drive. And I was at the end zone where, they got the final score, and it was just elation and just an amazing experience.
Nothing better than seeing Notre Dame lose and the fans go home unhappy, not happy. So
absolutely, and from that point on, I'm a huge Notre Dame fan because I need that win to be a quality win. So
true. And then they go and lay an egg this week.
But then they laid an egg against Louisville, and I suspect I was actually surprised that they are 2.5-point favorites over USC for that game in South Bend.
I've got to tell you, though, and we'll touch on that in a little bit after this, but it's probably due to the lack of defense with the Trojans. They might have one of the worst defensive units in college football. I mean, they went to triple overtime against Arizona this weekend, and they really should have lost the game. Williams wasn't even playing well in the first half. Arizona controlled it, and it did go to triple overtime. And, to their credit, they did pull it out. But again, like LSU, my Tigers, a top 10 offense and a bottom 100 defense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. We'll see. We'll see if they can live up and bounce back, because I'd shoot them back up in the rankings if they can beat USC this weekend.
So Ohio State this week, plays at home, and they Maryland comes in with an undefeated team, one of their best teams in recent memory. Tua Tagovailoa. I love saying his name. My producer says, you got his name really good. I get Tua Tagovailoa. His quarterback, Talia, I believe is his name. And we've got Amber Alerts going on in the state of North Carolina. Evidently, someone's kidnapped another child. Hopefully they find them. But it's either tornadoes here. Todd, we get tornado warnings, we get hurricane warnings, and now we're getting Amber Alerts. So there's always something going on in Swartz Talkin Sports. But you guys welcome in, undefeated Maryland. You did say before the game you thought it would be a close game and that Ohio State would maybe pull away in the second half. Exactly what happened.
Yeah, they had that bye week and an emotional win at Notre Dame. So you kind of thought maybe they might start off a little flat against Maryland. They certainly did. Maryland, this was probably one of their better teams that they've had coming into the shoe. And so, yeah, it was kind of as expected that the first half was kind of a struggle, 10-10 at halftime. And then, the better team showed themselves. Ohio State's defense this year is markedly improved over last year. They're not giving up the big play. They're not getting as many sacks as they had in the past. But I think as fans and what we saw last year, we prefer kind of this bend but not break defense. Mm-hmm. But what is probably the biggest concern going forward for the rest of the year is their lack of running, and that starts up front. And I think that their offensive line is not winning the battles as they should, especially to these lesser opponents like a Maryland. And so that's a real concern that fans and I'm sure Ryan Day have as they go into the second half of the season.
Did Trayvon Henderson play in Saturday's game?
He did not.
Okay.
He was out. Apparently, he could have played, but they chose to keep him out. So I don't know if I didn't see why or what was wrong with him, but it sounds like he will suit up this week against Purdue.
Okay, so the remainder of the schedule that I'm looking at, I know you have it there. Ohio State really has 2 games left. The Big Ten is definitely competitive. You've got 3 teams in the top 8, right? You've got Ohio State is now number 3. Michigan is number 2, and they've looked very, very good. And Penn State has pretty much blown everybody out, and they're number 6 right now. It's really Michigan and Penn State, and they're going to have to win out, I think, to get to the playoffs. I don't think if they lose to Michigan and don't make it to a Big Ten playoff, I don't know if they're going to make it to the top 4 this year. Next year would be a cakewalk. They're going to get in next year. But where are they playing that game this year? Is that in Ann Arbor or in Columbus?
It's in Ann Arbor this year. So we have
Okay.
Penn State at home, which was just announced as a noon game.
Okay.
So which is tough on the fans, right? I mean, that means we got to get up at 8:00 to start tailgating and drinking. So we were kind of hoping for a 3:30 game or even a night game. But with Fox, that they want to promote the big noon as their marquee matchup.
Right.
So that's going to be a noon game at home. And listen, Penn State, they look impressive, but they haven't really necessarily played anybody either. Mm-hmm. I think we always play those guys tough, but we always seem to get a win. So I really think that we're going to get past Penn State, and then it's all going to come down to the big game in November up at the Big House. And right now, I don't feel good about that game. But hopefully, if we can start running the ball and keep playing defense the way we're playing, then I think it's anybody's game.
Yeah, it's interesting. For years, I know the Michigan fans always said, Tressel or Urban Meyer have our number. Now it's almost reversed, right? It's Jim Harbaugh that is really doing well against Ohio State. He's actually recruiting well in the state of Ohio. Still, and for years, Michigan got good players out of Ohio and vice versa. But I know there's a running back that is the number 1 rated back in the country, rated running back, and he's out of Moeller High School, and he's committed to go to Michigan, which, I don't know, that's a tough one for Ohio State to lose a back of that quality to Michigan.
Yeah, we were worried, right, about Harbaugh when he took that job and thought that he would, steal a lot of recruits. And it didn't happen right away. I mean, he certainly didn't have the success that Michigan fans thought that he would have when he joined the program. But now it's starting to come to fruition. And he's got a good, solid program with recruits coming in, and I hate to say it, Michigan is back.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably back to stay. So we're really hoping that maybe Harbaugh will jump on one of these NFL coaching positions when they become vacant.
Maybe the Patriots use him because maybe Bill Belichick's expiration date is up, and who knows, maybe they go with Jim Harbaugh. I know a lot of New England fans right now would like to see that happen, but so now you've got really the big three, right? I mean, the Big Ten, the western side of that whole division right now. I mean, it's interesting, Todd, years ago, I think it was 2011 when they brought Nebraska into the Big Ten, and they were expecting to get the Nebraska brand, right? You know, the Tom Osborne brand. It really hasn't worked out. And, you know, they brought over Tom, I forget, who was the coach? Scott Frost, they got from UCF. Yeah. And he was supposed to resurrect the Nebraska program. That hasn't worked. So, I mean, now next year you're getting the Pac-12, right? You're getting USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, which, you know, right now this year, if they were in the Big Ten, that would be murderer's row to play that kind of a schedule. I look at it next year, a lot of those quarterbacks won't be playing. Good programs, but I still think that Ohio State, Michigan rule the Big Ten next year, even with the Pac-12 teams coming in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think anything's going to change with the top three, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. Certainly, Wisconsin's going to be a program on the rise once Luke Fickell gets a couple years under his belt. Mm-hmm. You know, Oregon will be good. USC, you know, Chip Kelly on the UCLA side, you know, he's got his team playing at least good defense, and that's what it's going to, you know, you can't, I don't think the Big Ten is like those other conferences, especially like the Pac-12, where you're going to have you're just not going to have these 50 to, you know, 49 games.
They play a little
defense. Yeah. So yes, I do think that, especially when the quarterbacks leave, although you never know about Caleb Williams, he may make more money in college than he would in the NFL. So he might stay another year, but certainly those other programs, as you mentioned, they're going to have to find some high-powered talent in the quarterback position to be able to compete next year.
So we get the Big Ten really, and we both think it's going to be a race. It's going to really come down to if they can take care of Penn State, it's going to be a Michigan and Ohio State again, right, for the battle to really represent the Big Ten, because I do not think anyone out of the West has a chance to beat either one of those two teams or Penn State for that matter. But nationally, you know, you and I talked earlier today, we're a little surprised that, you know, Oklahoma, who really hadn't played anybody, putting up a lot of points, obviously, but really hadn't played anybody, goes in a tough game, you know, beats Texas. And Texas, you know, was undefeated, played at Tuscaloosa, beat the Tide by double digits. You know, yours made some mistakes, obviously. We both agree that was the big difference, right? 3 interceptions. But how surprised were you that Oklahoma went in there and Dylan Gabriel was able to not just pass, but I think he ran for a $119 and a touchdown. I mean, that was pretty surprising.
Yeah. You know, Oklahoma's always, you know, they've kind of hung their hat on their head coach's. He's a defensive guy from Clemson.
Venables,
so
right?
Venables, and they so they play good D, but their offense, you know, was pretty explosive. For them to come back after that field goal with, you know, I don't know, less than 2 minutes, that was very impressive. And you know, what's nice about the Big 12 is they got rid of the divisions, right? And so you could have a Big 12 championship rematch of Texas and Oklahoma, assuming those two continue to win out, and that would be exciting. And obviously, whoever would win that game would most likely be in your Final Four.
Now, before we go to a commercial, I have to get your take on what everyone is calling potentially one of the dumbest coaching moves in recent memory. People are talking about it since that Giants Joe Pisarcik, Larry Zonka handoff that put the Eagles in the playoffs in 1978. And that's the Miami Hurricanes this weekend against Georgia Tech. All Mario Cristobal's team has to do is take a knee on 3rd down and 10, and the clock runs out. He hands off the running back, I think his name was Don Chaney, I believe, breaks through the line and gets stripped, loses the ball with 32 seconds to go. Georgia Tech has no timeouts. Georgia Tech gets the ball and in 2 plays goes 70-odd yards and scores a touchdown against Miami. What are you thinking, Todd, right in this? What's in your mind about something like this?
I mean, that is such a huge, just complete brain fart, not only in the head coach position, but the entire coaching staff. I mean, who's not talking to each other saying, let's just kneel the ball down? And so you feel bad for the kid that fumbled it, but then as we talked about, there's two plays then that they can, stop Georgia Tech from scoring a touchdown. One of them is keeping the receiver in front of you at all times. And I think when that winning touchdown, like he threw it over three defensive backs. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? So it's just a complete, not only that one play, but then the subsequent two plays after that was just a complete breakdown. And you really got to feel for those kids because they were having a great year. I see they're all the way down to 25th. So, there's a chance that they can build themselves back up. But what a terrible loss on that franchise.
Not very good, and he's going to be second, third, and fourth guest. But we're going to come back. We're going to talk Heisman, and we'll talk a little NHL with Todd Treeger after a word from this.
Millie's Ice Cream Shop, a full-service store in the Waterford Shopping Plaza of Leland, offering an array of tasty treats, including both hard and soft ice cream in a variety of flavors and delectable combinations to appeal to even the discerning palate, assured to put a big smile on everyone's face. Stop by today to enjoy your satisfying experience.
Welcome back to Swartz Talkin Sports. I'm your host, Les Swartz. We're joined today by Todd Treeger. We're talking a little Big Ten football. Todd's nice enough to join us from Columbus, Ohio. This is not a live show. We're actually pre-taping this show. It's being shown on Thursday night. If you haven't had a chance to, please check out our show last night. Vince Coleman, former St. Louis Cardinal great, one of the best base stealers to ever play, National League MVP. Great stories about his career, World Series, and also the state of baseball today. So if you haven't, please check that out. Hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think. Comment. Let us know what kind of content you want to hear. Todd, we got into a little Big Ten football. Excellent analysis, by the way. We always talk all the time. It's great to get it on the air. Let's take a look at your Heisman. Like, who do you think's the front runner for the Heisman? Obviously, Caleb Williams is the incumbent. He's the guy that everyone had could win it 2 years in a row from a beating or tying another Ohio State great, Archie Griffin, the only guy to ever do it. Besides Williams, who do you see if they've got some big games coming up that could potentially make a run at the Heisman this year?
Well, I think Michael Penix Jr. I mean, that Washington team looks good. It passes the eye test, and he's doing a great job of spreading the ball around. They got a huge game this week against Oregon. If they win that, I think he becomes, top three in the Heisman race. So Bo Nix. I think what has he been in school for 7 or 8 years now, and
I know.
And
he's been playing since like 1900 or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, I also like Jordan Travis from Florida State. I think he's really nobody thought Florida State was going to be this good, and I know they've kind of struggled maybe against some lesser teams, but he's putting up some great numbers, and there's no reason why they can't run the ACC. And if they do that, then they're in the top 4.
Well, I was going to say Clemson's definitely not the Clemson of old, right? And I don't know if Florida State plays Notre Dame this year. I'm not sure.
They don't.
So you're right. Then Duke could be. I don't know. It's kind of a nice story. They almost upset Notre Dame. They're certainly not a cakewalk, but I agree with you. The quarterback's hurt. He got hurt in that Notre Dame game. Don't know what his availability is moving forward. But to your point, Florida State, if they stay healthy, they should run the table in the ACC, right? I really think so. Another one that we talked about, obviously, in the Red River rivalry this week was Dylan Gabriel, who outplayed Quinn Ewers. I mean, Ewers threw for a lot of yards, but he made some mistakes.
Yeah, and honestly, I hadn't really been following him all that much because I guess I just thought Oklahoma would kind of be slightly better than they were last year. But watching that game, as I was flipping back and forth between the Ohio State game, I mean, he was just his poise during that was the biggest game of his career. To go out there and lead those guys down to win the game, definitely he is ramped up there, probably in the top 5 category of the Heisman race. And then of course you got JJ McCarthy out there, who as a Michigan guy can't root for him at all, but he is a talented quarterback. He's got great speed. He can run the ball. He makes good decisions. It's just there's something about that lineage, right? The McCarthys, my goodness, they're all like just born to be good at football.
So what is the deal with? I have to ask you a question. So we had on a guest a couple weeks ago, great Bob Harris, who played at Auburn and played in 4 Iron Bowls, and we talked about that rivalry because it's an in-state rivalry being so intense. obviously Michigan, Ohio State, that's a huge one, right? And they seem to always play for something. There's always something on the line there. Is it a level of hatred towards Michigan? Is it a respect thing that we just want to beat them? We know they're good. We acknowledge that, but we just don't like them. What's the rivalry really like between an Ohio State fan base and Michigan fan base?
It's true hatred. It truly is. I mean, we do not like them. I don't even like the colors. I don't like even when my daughters dress up and they've got, blue and yellow on. It's just, but it's also a respectful hatred, I'd like to say, because, both programs have been very successful. I forget what the all-time record is. I think Michigan still got the edge despite, how much we dominated during the, 2010s. Mm-hmm. But man, I grew up in really getting involved in college football in the 90s and all the John Cooper years and all those great teams that we had just to get, beat by Michigan. And it still is one of those, despite the level of, at Ohio State where we expect to always play for championships, if we went, won 2 games all year and one of them was Michigan, people would be upset with the season, but we'd still be happy. And that's just the level of how much you just want to beat that team. And if you can't be successful, then you want to ruin their season by just beating the heck out of them.
Now, real quick, and I didn't know this, and you probably do, being a Big Ten guy. So next year, when the 4 teams enter the Big Ten from the Pac-12, are there going to be divisions? Is it going to be like the Big 12, where there's just going to be 18 teams? And how is that going to be orchestrated next year in the Big Ten?
Yeah, so it's going to be just one big division, okay. 18 teams, no divisions. Top 2 teams get in. There are 12 protected matchups, which I looked before I got on the show. Some of them are kind of comical. They're protecting 3 Iowa games: Iowa versus Minnesota, Iowa versus Nebraska, and Iowa versus Wisconsin.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know who politicked for that. But obviously, Ohio State, Michigan will always play every year. UCLA versus USC, Oregon versus Washington. Michigan versus Michigan State. So those are protected. Penn State's got no rivalries apparently. So there's, nothing that they'll.
It's an East team. They really don't have rivalries, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Rutgers.
So it's Rutgers and Maryland apparently is enough to protect every year because people are dying to see that matchup. So the way they've got it scheduled, there's 9 conference. You'll play your 9 teams in the conference. Mm-hmm. Over the course of 5 years, you don't play the same team more than 3 times. And they just released the schedule 2024 through 27. And Ohio State will end up playing away games at Oregon and Penn State, and they have a home game against Michigan. Michigan, though, man, they're really sticking it to them. They've got Ohio State away, Washington away, Oregon at home, USC at home. So that's a tough match.
That is a tough sledding. Yeah, absolutely. Well, they probably don't like. I'm not a Harbaugh guy. I'm not a Jim Harbaugh guy. I'm not his brother in the NFL with Baltimore. I'm not a Harbaugh guy. But the guy can coach. But just as you pointed out, I mean, that's a tough schedule to navigate through, right?
And maybe it's because they've looked at Michigan over the course of the last couple of seasons and realized they play absolutely nobody in their non-conference opponents.
That is true. I was going to say this year, they had 3 layups right out of the gate, correct?
Yeah.
And Harbaugh didn't even coach in any of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So,
well, I didn't know about that, so that's great. I'm curious. I was curious to know how they were going to set the Big Ten up, like the Big 12, and I'm sure the SEC will do something similarly. I know Oklahoma and Texas get to the SEC next year, and they're potentially looking at adding on maybe a Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami in the future, which wouldn't shock me if that happens over the next 3 years. But that's college football now, right? It's all about conference realignment, super league, super conferences, and I don't know about you, Todd, but I think eventually the NCAA is not going to have any say in college football.
Agreed. I think and I've seen other pundits talk about this. Eventually, you're just going to have this like Super 60 league, and they're going to separate themselves from the NCAA, and they're all going to play in like an NFL style where you get a AFC in one and NFC in the other, 30 teams in each side, and maybe they'll call it the Big Ten and the SEC. But I think that's eventually where you're going, and you'll get into a 12, maybe even a 16 team playoff, and they're going to make a gazillion dollars for the networks.
Exactly.
And that's life going forward. I just hope that if that happens, that they do some kind of like English Premier Soccer regulation where some of those bottom teams get kicked out for some of the, up and comers. Because, as we talked earlier about Nebraska, if we're talking about an inclusion of a big conference, well, then let's get the best 60 teams. All right.
Agreed.
Let's just start, let's not just bring Nebraska, IU, and Northwestern in just because they're part of the Big Ten. Let's get the best teams in the country and have a league that way.
If there's a vote for a new commissioner in college football, I'm going to vote you as the new commissioner. The voice of reason.
I can do it. I'm ready.
Well, I was going to say you have a pretty busy schedule, but I think they'd pay you a little bit more, right?
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
A little bit. Well, let's shift gears real quick while we've got you for a few more minutes, and let's talk a little something that you're really passionate, and that's NHL, and that's pro hockey, right? You're a big Columbus Blue Jacket fan. I've had the privilege of attending a few games with you, one of them against my Boston Bruins. Are the Blue Jackets looking like any kind of a potential playoff threat this year?
Oh God, no. But we should be better
God,
than the 58 points that we had, or 59, whatever it was. We were the worst team in the East. We should be improved from that. They've shored up some weakness on the defense with acquisitions of Severson from New Jersey and Proporov from the Flyers. Now with a healthy Zach Werenski, so the blue line should be markedly improved. Mm-hmm. The forwards, obviously, we've got Fantinelli.
And he's the rookie that they got from your favorite school, the University of Michigan.
Michigan and Kent Johnson from Michigan, who I attended the game last year when he did the Michigan leg type of lacrosse type of picking up the puck and dumping it in the corner of the net. I'll have to send you a link to that. That's one of the most awesome goals I've ever seen. But they're a young team. They should be able to score points, but what's going to be their Achilles heel is goaltending. We all were hoping that Elvis Merzlikins would be the goaltender of the future. I don't think that's going to happen, and so they're going to have to score a lot of goals because they're probably still going to give up a lot of goals. So I see them, best case scenario, they're keeping us in the hunt, keeping things interested, but they probably fall, 9, 10, 11 in the standings. Worst case scenario, they come out of the gate terribly like they did the year before, and I'm able to scalp tickets relatively cheap for the rest of the season.
It's always about making a buck, right? And if I get to Columbus in the next year, we'll go to a game and we'll hit that bar that we always hit with that massive beer-like goalie thing. That thing was insane. Remember that?
Yeah. Our bar. It's a great bar.
Fantastic bar. We'll hit that one. Well, let me ask you a quick question. The Golden Knights, Vegas, do they repeat? Do they have enough to repeat as Stanley Cup champs?
They certainly have the depth, which was their success last year, especially in the playoffs. There's no reason to think that they can't compete and repeat. Although that West is tough, right? You got the Avs, you've got the Oilers, the Stars, the Kings should be better. Mm-hmm. That's probably it. The Wild, Seattle, and the Flames are kind of my bottom part of the playoffs. So I think it's going to come down to really those top four teams: Vegas, Avs, Oilers, Stars. The question is, can Edmonton finally reach the next level? I was just reading that they're implementing a new system to try to help out on the defensive end, which has been their Achilles heel. Right. As you know, they can score goals like anybody's business, but they just can't stop them. But I think at the end of the day, I like Vegas coming out of the West.
Well, I'm just looking at my Boston Bruins, right? And we lose Patrice Bergeron. He retires. Should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he's not, someone ought to break out an investigation because he's probably or arguably the best defensive center to ever play in the NHL. 6 Selke Awards. They lose Krejci to retirement too. I know they got some good young players. Pasternak's a tremendous goal scorer, but you need someone to feed you the puck to score goals. And I don't think they've got a natural center on that team as of right now. So I'm hoping the Bruins do something, but I'm I'm not overly optimistic. I mean, my God, they set the record last year and got knocked out of the first round by the 8th seed Florida Panthers. So we'll see what's happening there. But I'm going to give you a pick. If you had to take one pick right now, obviously injuries factor into it. We know if you're picking one team and you're putting your mortgage in the house, I know your wife would kill you, but you're mortgaging in the house, who are you putting it on to win the Stanley Cup?
To win the Stanley Cup? I'm going to go with Carolina. I think they've been so close. They've, obviously ran into the Cinderella story with the Panthers, but that team is still there. I can see them winning the East and going on and finally taking the next step, beating the Golden Knights of Vegas.
All right. Well, obviously you got not a bad pick. Carolina's been there, a number of years. They had some injuries last year that really hurt that team moving forward, but like that pick. I'm not going to mortgage anything, but I do like that pick. Well, listen, this has been awesome. I thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're extremely busy. You're running the kids to soccer and volleyball and everything else, and I really do appreciate you taking the time, and I'd love to do this again, maybe before the Ohio State-Michigan game. Hopefully they'll both be undefeated. That'll be a massive game, so have a great week for your sake. Go Bucks and Bowling Green Falcons, and you and I will catch up down the road, my man.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Les. Appreciate
Thanks, Todd.
It. All right. We'll see you.
Welcome back to Swartz Talkin Sports. I'm Les Swartz. I want to thank our guest, Todd Treeger. Todd was great. Some great insight on college football, especially the Big Ten, and he knows his hockey too. So we're definitely going to bring Todd back to talk about both sports and any sport. He's also a big Dallas Cowboy fan. I didn't get a chance to tease him about the big loss against the 49ers this week. If you haven't already, please check out the show with Vince Coleman last night. Former St. Louis Cardinal, played on 5 big league teams, but had a great career, some great insight in Major League Baseball, Vince's career, and also his take on the state of Major League Baseball today. Again, as always, too, great thanks to all our sponsors for really supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And as always, our show is available via Spotify and Google Podcasts. So if don't have the chance to actually sit down on a Wednesday at 7 o'clock and see us live, you can always check that out. And we're available to please follow us on Instagram and on TikTok under Swartz Talkin Sports. So thanks again to everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m.